September 10th, 2001. One day before America and the world changed. 1 year into the new millennium, and you had the usual stuff going on in the world for the very early 2000s. I know a lot of us who were young at the time were just going back to school, and the gaming world definitely had a lot to look forward to as well. Metal Gear Solid 2, Devil May Cry, and Grand Theft Auto 3, which was slated for release in early October. I don't think I need to fully explain just how revolutionary this game was. It defined the open world genre as we know it, and back in 2001, it truly set the standard for what an open world game really was. But on September 11th, 2001, the devastating events that took place in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania took attention away from basically everything else going on. It became the focal point of every conversation, the subject of every headline, and the leading topic that would go on to define this time period. The days following the attacks were a time of crucial decision-making for many, even those within the video game industry. Metal Gear Solid 2 had to have some elements changed due to scenes that were set in New York City featuring the destruction of buildings in Lower Manhattan. Microsoft Flight Simulator was supposed to be released on September 11th, but it was delayed a month to remove the World Trade Center from the game. Siphon Filter 3 had to be delayed because a marketing campaign for a game focusing on international terrorism, including a section where bombs are placed throughout the Capitol building, was simply not appropriate at the time. And then came Grand Theft Auto 3. Rockstar Games was in kind of a unique situation all on their own because while the actual development work for GTA happens in Scotland at the former DMA Design, now Rockstar North, Rockstar's main corporate offices are in New York City, specifically in Lower Manhattan. At the time, they were located at 575 Broadway, about 2 miles north of the World Trade Center. This meant that getting into work for at least a week after the attacks was basically impossible. All bridges and tunnels into Manhattan were closed, so anybody who lived outside of Manhattan and commuted there for work was not going anywhere. Subway services were suspended, all vehicle traffic was prohibited from some areas for over a month, with only emergency crews being given access. Dan Houser even told IGN in an interview in 2011 that the roads to the offices were all blocked off. Other issues within their environment were also problematic. After the collapse of the World Trade Center towers, Lower Manhattan was covered in a huge toxic dust cloud, and the air was not suitable to breathe. Then there were power outages and other infrastructure issues. Traffic signals were going out, and telecommunications and network service disruptions were frequent for a period after the attacks. But beyond the idea of can we physically conduct business here comes the more sensitive side of things. The game, for its time, was extremely violent, and while Liberty City, according to Rockstar, was based on a mixture of US cities, its primary basis was obviously New York City. So when the attacks happened just 2 miles away in the same city as Rockstar, and they could practically see the tragedy from right outside their windows, it must have had a profound effect on them. Dan Houser told CVG in 2011 that the mood in the office at the time was very upsetting, very unnerving, and overwhelming. According to the book Jacked by David Kushner, Rockstar Games co-founders Sam and Dan Houser actually questioned after the attacks whether or not they should even release GTA 3 at all. That's right, Grand Theft Auto 3 was at least briefly under consideration to be shelved. The country was being attacked, including the same city Rockstar are based in. The company were making a violent crime drama set in a very similar city, and Sam Houser, in his words, felt like this crazy game that they made isn't exactly where people's thoughts were going to be focused on at the time. But 1 week after the attacks, rather than shelving the game, the Housers decided to move ahead with production, but this time choosing to go for a 3-week delay instead, to make the necessary changes such as changing the flight path of planes, making sure the players can't destroy the planes, and changing the box art in North America to the now iconic panel style, because the original box art, which was used for the European release, was thought to be too violent looking for the North American market after the attacks. The game was released on October 22nd, 2001, but could you imagine what would have happened if the game ended up actually being shelved? As a fan, I'm very thankful that it wasn't, but I still can't help but imagine what if. Reading about this in that book for the first time honestly surprised the hell out of me, but given the mood at the time, I could see why the thought would have crossed their minds. While video games are escapism, could some elements of GTA 3 simply have been seen as too inappropriate given what had just happened? And if the game was shelved, what would have happened then? Most likely, I think the game would have eventually come out. By September 11th, the game was only a few weeks away from release. I just feel that they would have waited on releasing the game until a little later, maybe sometime in 2002 or 2003, but that's provided that they wouldn't be working on something else instead, like Vice City. A game based on Miami Vice and Scarface and set in Miami in the 80s is going to look far different from a game set in an East Coast city in 2001. If GTA 3 was shelved, maybe they would have felt a little more comfortable with a violent game set in a much different time and place than the one set in a New York City-ish city with a contemporary setting right after 9/11. Vice City's development already began a little bit before GTA 3 was released, and it was originally intended as just a GTA 3 expansion pack, so it seems like either way you look at it, it was destined to become its own standalone game. The next, and less likely scenario, in my opinion, is that the game would have been shelved indefinitely, which I know is a bit more sensational, the thought of GTA 3 being completely cancelled and no GTA ever coming out again, but I just doubt they would have done that even if they had shelved the game. If that had happened though, how would Rockstar have continued as a company? GTA is what put them on top, and GTA also defined what an open world game really was. We would have maybe seen something else trying to follow that formula, but even then, GTA acted as the gold standard and the title that other developers could look at and think, how do we do something like this? Without that, who knows how the potential future titles could have turned out, or how gaming would have even turned out. Let me know what you guys think about all of this. Thanks for watching.